My name is Michael Astle. I head up the legal team at Quotient Sciences. We're a UK-based life sciences business helping our customers design and test new medicines for the first time. And it's great to be here.
Great. Would you be so kind as well, just to give us sort of quick synopsis on your background as well?
Yeah, of course. So law is my second career, Gianpaolo.
Hmm.
So I've had some time overseas in Spain, running my own relocation business.
Hmm.
And then after that, about 15 years ago, I returned to the UK, requalified as a lawyer. And since then, I trained in a financial services firm and I've had a couple of roles in the life sciences scope as well.
Okay, and I guess from that side, what sort of drove that move to requalify as a lawyer? Was it by accident, or did you come across some sort of information on the GDL like I did personally? I found it on YouTube. I'd never really considered retraining as a lawyer at the time, and then I came across a video on YouTube. So I guess this is why we're doing the podcast as well, to put material out there that people can find. So it'd be great to have an understanding of what sort of drove you in that sort of career trajectory.
Yeah, of course. And I can remember the moment really clearly, Gianpaolo,
Mm,
being in my office in Spain, working with a lawyer we brought in to help us with a tricky thing. And I thought, this job sounds really interesting.
mm,
We're asking about a business problem at the time. He could turn his hand to it. We spoke about difficulties with clients. We spoke about criminal matters, all kinds of different things. And this lawyer I was speaking to, he seemed to have an answer for everything. It was really interesting. And I thought, wow, how rewarding, um, how exciting a career must that be to have that level of knowledge and that depth of knowledge across all these different topic areas. And from that moment, I thought, this is something I'd like to do.
okay. So that really drove you to then relocate to the UK. Did you? I assume that you either left the business or sold the business and then came back and started studying the GDL. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I saw my business after 7 years. We've grown successfully and helped thousands of people relocate to Spain. But for me, I was ready for a different challenge, something a bit more complex, something that
Mm,
would give some more longevity to my career. So I came out to the UK. I hadn't been to university previously. So
okay.
for me, it was part-time undergraduate degree, 4 years of study around work, and then part-time LPC alongside the training contract as well. So
Mm,
back to school, but it was really enjoyable and definitely worthwhile.
mm. And if you don't mind me asking as well, what did you do for work when you came back?
I work for a financial services firm, so I was very much in an operational role, managing a team, working with customers on the
Mm,
front line. And as that role developed, I was fortunate enough to be close to the headquarters of that business.
mhm.
So I was able to work in the HQ after a while, got to know the legal team, um, made a really good impression working on some related matters in the regulatory space,
Mm.
which got me some exposure, some good connections with the leadership team. And so when I was ready to make that transition into more of a legal career, they were really supportive. And that resulted in a training contact in an in-house legal team, which was a fantastic experience to help start my career.
That's amazing. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the podcast as well, because I just think there are many routes to having a successful legal career. Not every single person has a linear career trajectory where they leave university with an LLB, they get a training contract, and boom, they work their way up to partner in a law firm. There are many people out there that have had a different route, and I think those can be very interesting, especially for anyone that might watch this podcast who is maybe thinking of making a career change into law. There are people out there who have walked those footsteps before, and I think it's very insightful to suggest that when you reach a certain age or a certain part in your career, there's always still that opportunity to change if you decide that's really what you want to focus on. So yeah, it's really good to get that sort of perspective. So you done the training contract in house. How would you say that sort of shaped you as a lawyer to maybe doing a training contract in private practice?
I think it was really beneficial. And I always remember there was one thing which happened to me my first day at my training contract, which has stuck with me ever since. So
Mhm.
bear in mind, I've been in the business for a few years. I was known to a few people. My very first day as a trainee, a colleague came up to me in the office and asked me for some advice on a problem.
Mhm.
Now, I was surrounded by lawyers, people with way more legal experience, but they didn't know them. They didn't feel comfortable about talking to them or as comfortable as talking to myself. So, day one, I got this question out of the blue, and I didn't know the answer. I had to go away and work on it and speak to colleagues and research it.
Mhm.
But just that very first instance where people came to somebody that was recognizable, perhaps more accessible, that
Mhm.
really made something stick in my mind, which is that as lawyers, we need to be accessible to people. We need to have a friendly persona. We need to be reachable. Otherwise, our colleagues won't come to us, or if they do, they'll be scared to do it.
Mhm.
Let's face it, for most people, when they see a lawyer, it's because they're in trouble, right? They've got a problem, they need some difficulty. So for me, as in my role at the moment, one of the things I'm really keen to do is make sure that people feel comfortable coming to talk to me or to my team. And that all stems from that very first day in my training contract.
Yeah, that speaks to my experience working in house. What I found from my experience was, um, and traditionally speaking, some people see legal as sort of sitting in their ivory tower, where it's scary to approach legal. And I think if you make your presence, especially as a sort of general counsel or head of legal, present within those sales teams, they know who you are, and they feel comfortable around you, then you'll find that a lot less people might try to hide and might a lot less people might try less to hide, maybe an issue that they're having, or a mistake that they've made, or and I feel feeling comfortable coming forward and saying, look, I've got this problem, can you help me? Is really important, and it's really where that sort of senior lawyer make sure within a business that legal is accessible to everyone within that business. That could be anywhere from the sales team to the cleaner. And I think that's really important. I feel that the best sort of general counsels and heads of legal sort of radiate that across their legal team. And I think that's a really sort of soft skill that many people don't really think about, but it's very, very important from the in-house perspectives.
100% agree, Gianpaolo, and it brings a couple of benefits as well. So one is as you mentioned, you're more likely to find out about something perhaps earlier in its development. And
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, the earlier you find out about something, the more opportunity you've got to influence its path or make the outcome better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other reason why it's important, I've lost my train of thought. There we go. There are two reasons. Why do we want people to be accessible? It makes your job more enjoyable. That's the second one.
Mm-hmm.
So if we stick ourselves as lawyers in ivory towers and we just deal with kind of abstract things or problems which are brought to us at the last minute, our
Mm-hmm.
role is less enjoyable. I find it much more interesting to be involved with the business as they start and design projects, create new initiatives, try and fix things. By getting involved early on, we can have more influence, but also enjoy our roles a bit more.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. It brings me on to my next question. Why pharma law, and how did you end up in that sector? Because a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, when you're at law school, you're not really thinking, I'm going to go into that specific sector. Sometimes, you can fall into it by, a door opening or closing. So it'd be good to sort of understand how you got into that sort of regulated field.
Yeah, of course. So I've always worked in firms which have a regulatory background.
Mhm.
So my skill set and my experience is very much in that arena. But my move into life sciences was a bit of an accident almost. So after I
Mhm.
left financial services, there was a really interesting sole counsel role close to where I lived at the time. And it was an organization which recognized the experience from my regulated background and they were willing to teach me the pharma side of it. Similarly with the role I'm in now, I joined it with limited pharma experience, but the business is more than happy to help you through and learn some of the technicalities and intricacies of a particular sector. The skills you've already got stand you in good stead, right? Your analytical skills, your
Mhm.
communication skills, your ability to advise and negotiate, they can be used in any scenario. So I think it's really important for young lawyers not to get too hung up on sectors,
Mhm.
either ones which you really want to do, because let's face it, you might not like it when you're there, or things which you're not sure about because you've not experienced before. There's always the opportunity to learn, and firms will often be willing to train people up or educate them there. I saw some data just today around GC placements, and the majority of those go to GCs who aren't from the same sector. They're going into senior roles even without a background in that sector. So it's definitely something which isn't important if you're looking to change careers. Yes, it can be helpful, but it's certainly not essential.
Yeah, I would definitely say in industry and commerce, GCs are much easier to sort of and fluidly move across the different sectors. In the regulated, it's a little bit more challenging. Companies generally seek, someone with that sort of regulated background, but doesn't mean someone from a regulated background can't move into that industry and commerce, which often we see as well. So yeah, it moves me on to my next question, actually. What now you've sort of been legal counsel upwards, and you sort of experienced the sort of whole in-house sort of spectrum. What do you think the sort of key soft skills that an in-house lawyer really needs to develop to move into a sort of senior role where strategy, etc., become more important?
I think there are three key things for me, Gianpaolo. First one is to add value in what you do. So you're not just dispensing legal advice. Think about how you can make it more valuable. It might be that when you send a note to somebody, you actually do a draft email which they can forward on to their colleagues. It might be that you make a suggestion about how they can improve another part of the process or the project which you've seen as well. Very much going beyond the legal piece and adding extra value wherever you can. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is you need to be really aware that your job is to provide solutions, not legal solutions, but solutions which are business focused. So I learned this the hard way earlier on in my career. I'd been asked to present on an issue or contribute to a conversation, should I say, on a particular topic. And I went away and worked really hard and did what I think was a really solid legal analysis. And I put that across to my colleagues. And they said, great, thanks very much. But we're going to do something completely different. We're going to do a different commercial solution to that problem. So what I'd done wasn't wrong, but I'd missed a key part of the jigsaw, which was I could have had an input into the wider solution, the commercial choices, how we could negotiate with this counterparty, how we could influence the outcome in a non-legal way. So that's the second point. And the third point I would say is you might well have the answers as a legal person, but you might not be the best person to deliver that. And what I mean by that is that if you put a lawyer in the room with another counterparty, with another organization, chances are they'll bring their lawyer as well. And that's not necessarily the best outcome, right? So sometimes it's better for you as a legal professional to sit behind the scenes, advise your colleagues, suggest appropriate courses of action, but then let them deliver the message. And that can be more impactful and produce fewer hurdles and obstacles than if you were to jump in with 2 feet and try and deliver the same message. Not because you're not competent, not because you can't do it, not because you don't have the skills, but just because that lawyer hat on your head can sometimes provoke the wrong reaction from the other side. So those are 3 things I think are really key for people wanting to make an influence at a senior level.
I think that's good advice. That leads me on to my next question around the sort of challenges in the sort of pharma sector specifically. What sort of the main challenges that you find are in that specific sector that if someone is watching this podcast is maybe considering moving into pharma, what's the good, what's the bad, and what's the ugly?
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Wow. So the good's easy, right? So hopefully you're doing it for a really good cause. I get a lot of good feeling and goodwill about the fact that what I'm doing day to day is helping contribute towards bringing new medicines to market, and that's a really positive feeling. The bad bit I see with pharma, I suppose, is it's really siloed. It's very traditional in some of its approaches. So unfortunately for society, medicines take a really long time to come to market. Average is 10 years, costs $1 billion to bring a new molecule to market. We've only seen that challenge a little bit during the COVID pandemic when the vaccines made it in a year or so's duration. that was with the whole world watching and everybody throwing the kitchen sink at something. So
Mm,
for me, it's not just a legal problem, it's more of a business problem, but the industry is extremely siloed, which brings a whole host of challenges.
mm,
Um, the ugly side, not too much, to be honest. It is generally a positive industry. There's definitely some really tough commercial pressures at some of the pharma companies in terms of who gets to market first. And they keep their position there.
mm.
And from a distance, I can see that gets a bit ugly sometimes, but thankfully, I'm not quite in that space.
Okay, brilliant. Um, and with regards to, when you did move into that sort of first senior position, um, did you experience imposter syndrome? A lot of lawyers that I speak to when they take their first sort of senior, I guess, high stakes role, that very first day or week, they feel that sort of imposter syndrome. So it's always a question I like to ask. Did you experience that yourself? And anyone that is experiencing that, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, great question. I didn't feel it too keenly.
Mhm,
I suppose the reason that was, Gianpaolo, is that lawyers are really well trained. We have the benefit normally of 6, 7, 8 years training. And oftentimes the folks we're talking to don't have that training. In fact, almost always they don't have that training. So
mhm,
even though you might be speaking to a really experienced businesswoman or an executive, their legal background is probably likely to be nil. So
mhm,
even though you might feel that you're newly qualified or recently qualified, chances are your legal education is way beyond the person you're speaking to. It doesn't
mhm.
mean you're better than them or anything
Of
like
course.
that, but it means you should have confidence in your abilities, confidence in your judgment,
Mhm,
and recognize that they're coming to you for your opinion because you have these skills, you have this education.
mhm,
So for me, that really helps overcome the fear of imposter syndrome, or not being good enough or not being able enough.
mhm,
In terms of tips for people about how to deal with it, they have it.
mhm,
The good news is the law's complex, right? So if
mhm,
somebody comes to you with a question and you don't know the answer, just say to them, "Good question. This is a complex area. I'll have a look and I'll come back to you." And then you can
mhm.
go away, do your research, chat to colleagues, think about it. You won't be surprised. They know the law's complex. So
Exactly.
take the benefit of our sector being tricky, our um, the challenges in our sector and the difficulty and the complexity, and use that to your advantage, right?
Mhm.
Nobody's sat there thinking, I'm asking you an easy question. It was easy to solve it themselves. So take that bit, take that opportunity, take that time, and use it to your advantage.
And I think just on that imposter syndrome, it's a natural feeling for anyone, that moves in, it doesn't have to be legal, it can be any industry. Moving up those ranks, naturally you haven't sat in that seat before. It's a natural feeling and it passes quite quickly. So, it's not something that you should fear. It's a new challenge as well. So, it's definitely something that, I've spoke to a lot of lawyers, in my career and you'd be surprised some of the most high profile lawyers, who've made it to partner, have experienced it. So if they're experiencing it, you shouldn't be scared to experience imposter syndrome. At least,
Exactly. And that's
mm,
the best thing I would say, Gianpaolo, in terms of how to explain it to people, perhaps, is I'm a generalist, right? As an in-house lawyer, I
mm,
deal with employment, property, corporate, commercial, all kinds of things.
mm,
Um, and I try to use a medical analogy with people sometimes, which is that I'm a bit like a GP.
mm,
So I understand a wide range of things. I know where to get help. I can point you in the right direction. I'll often know the answer. But
mm,
if it's something complex or tricky, well, that's the
mm,
equivalent of a consultant or a brain surgeon or something like that.
mm,
Um, so you shouldn't expect to know all the answers. You wouldn't go to your GP and expect them to perform surgery on you or anything like that. And it's similar in the legal world, right?
mm,
And that can be a good way of explaining your role perhaps to people, particularly if you feel pressured that you should know the answer or you should be able to do more, or why do you need a second opinion from outside counsel? Well, it's that GP and surgeon analogy which I use, and that
mm.
generally resonates reasonably well with my audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good advice. It leads me on to my next question, which is around management. Uh, I guess when in your career did you first experience that sort of management responsibility, and how do you sort of what's your sort of I guess, philosophy around management. And also, did you take to it well, or did it take you a little bit of time to adapt to it? Because all personalities are different, and I think that's something that a lot of people that are moving into sort of management positions should always think about, is you can't manage every single person the same way, because they have different personalities and they're human at the end of the day.
Yes, a fascinating topic, Gianpaolo. When I first started being a manager in my own business in Spain, looking back, I must have been terrible. Honestly, there's so much room for improvement. So many things I could have done better.
Mhm.
Um, Through the operational phase of my career, it got better, managing small teams.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I started getting involved in my legal career that I feel my management skills really developed.
Mhm.
Um, a combination of things led to that. One, I had more training, which was helpful. But the most important one probably was life experience, and then reflecting on that life experience. So
Mhm.
thinking about managers I had in my own past. Why were they good? Why did I like them? Why would I go the extra mile for one person, but refuse to absolutely for another person?
Mhm.
What were the traits which were common between those different examples?
Mhm.
And once I started having those experiences and then reflecting on them, that helped inform how I'd like to be as a manager and how I'd like my teams to hopefully feel working with me.
No, absolutely. The next topic is around commercial awareness. And I wanted to ask you this specific question due to your background. This, I guess, buzzwords get thrown around a lot in sort of training contract applications and law firms. Um, with regards to commercial awareness, how do you feel your sort of previous experience working in a business, running a business, having that sort of skill set before moving into law really has helped your career to date?
It's been a big bonus. It brings its own challenges running your own company. You have to think about every single sector, the
Mm,
marketing, the administration, making payroll, processes, operations. Every single aspect comes down to you as a business leader. And that was certainly super helpful for me.
mm,
Um, when I've interviewed prospective candidates in the past, or when I've worked with other lawyers, and
mm,
this topic comes up, I think the way I found most useful to think about it is not so much about commercial awareness, but
mm,
about commercial curiosity. So awareness, right? You can read the paper all day long, but if you're not interested in the topic, if your mind isn't thinking about, well,
mm,
why has something happened? What's the story behind this? Why am I seeing lots of stories about the same topic? If you haven't got that curiosity, then you can have all the awareness in the world, but it's not really going to make that much difference to you.
mm,
So for me, I think it's more about commercial curiosity, seeing a story in the news, trying to understand what's been the driver for it, what's the consequence, what might happen from there.
mm,
That's the bit which is the next step beyond commercial awareness, which I think is really powerful for a lawyer to have. And it's something which is easily obtainable, right? You don't
mm,
need knowledge about a sector or about a particular business. You just have to be curious and want to think about, well, why this and what's next, what's coming down the path. And that's the curiosity that really makes good or great candidates stand out, or good or great lawyers stand out.
mm. And a question that I had was around, if you could look back in your past and speak to a younger Michael, what career advice or from your experience would you give to that sort of younger Michael with regards to what you've experienced today?
Wow, this is a tricky one, and very a lot of introspection required.
Mm,
Um, I think for me, it would be to know that you can't rush experience.
mm,
So, like a lot of folks in this industry, I was always reasonably capable, reasonably intellectually competent, and always in a hurry to get somewhere. And that served me well in many parts of my career.
mm,
But actually, through being an in-house lawyer, I've realised that just taking the time, just having that experience
mm,
makes a world of difference. Um, as in-house lawyers, we get loads of situations which might happen just once every 5 years or once every 10 years.
mm,
So it's only by living through those processes, living through those times, that you collect those bundles of experience, those little nuggets, which means
mm,
that next time you face it, you've got a much better idea how to handle it. It's less stressful, it's less drama, it takes up less time. So yeah, looking back, I'd say by all means be in a hurry, but also just be aware that experience is just that. It's the time, it's the repetitions of doing things, which will make things easier and
Mm.
bring you more competence.
Mm. And I guess for anyone that's, maybe sitting in law school or, even working as a paralegal at the moment, would you recommend, looking into the in-house career if, they hadn't really thought about it? And, you know, I guess what would you say the sort of main differentiators are from, having that sort of career in private practice? Because compared to in-house, because for me was nobody ever mentioned when I was in law school that, working in a law firm is very much, a business development role the more senior you get. And, I guess for anyone that's maybe thinking of having just maybe a different, legal experience, what advice would you give them to sort of, research into the in-house market, with regards to materials that you might be aware of, or, people who are, influential in this sphere?
Yeah, really interesting topic, Jan Paolo, and I think it's for me in-house is fascinating. I've got huge respect for private practice lawyers, many of them are my friends.
Mm.
But for me, in-house is so much more varied. You get to see the outcome of your work. You have a lot fewer of the systemic pressures that you might get in private practice. So for
Mm.
me, it's a great career, and it's a real shame that it's not publicised widely at the
Mm.
university stage or at the legal education stage. There are lots of reasons for it. I think the biggest one is it's fragmented. So it's really easy, right, to see the top 100 UK law firms. You can find them online. It's listed out for you. You can contact them. They all run training programs. Great, that's brilliant.
Mm.
But over a third of lawyers in the UK work in-house. It's a huge proportion of the industry. But the very fact that it's fragmented, it's one lawyer in this business, two or three in another company. And unless you're in, FTSE 100, FTSE 250, it's going to be those small teams.
Mm.
So it's definitely a challenge finding out the information. If you are interested in a career in-house law, there are a couple of organisations which specialise in helping trainees there. So Flex Legal, for example, has a good programme where it supports trainee in-house lawyers.
Mm.
The other way to look at it, and it's similar to the path which I took, is to look around your location, right? Which companies have their headquarters where you are, which are big enough to have a legal team? And make connections. Who do you know there? Might be some of your family, it might be some friends or their parents who are working in organizations. And if they're local to you, if they've got a big enough business, then there's a good chance they can get you some work experience in there. Or you could start a role in an adjacent type activity. So maybe dealing with customer complaints, for example, because they have a connection with legal often when things go really south, or in the regulatory space, and again, a connection with legal. And it's not about privilege, it's not about knowing lawyers or anything like that.
Mm.
Just look around you, see what's close to you, and I guarantee there'll be some opportunities there. So real try and make those connections, use what network you have, be it formal or informal, and reach out to people, right? Law has a long history of supporting people from disadvantaged backgrounds or young lawyers
Mm.
coming into the profession. So there's a good chance that if you get in touch with somebody in those businesses, they'll want to spend a bit of time with you and let you
Mm.
in for some work experience or have a coffee and give you some more information. So it's a bit harder, right? You can't just go to the
Yeah.
law firm's website and recruit and follow their recruitment path. But
Mm.
if you dig and if you look around and if you think a bit more broadly around your local geography, there's definitely opportunity there. There's definitely connections you can make, and that can pay real dividends.
I think one of the tricks to and I guess a golden nugget for this podcast for anyone who is in that sort of position and maybe is living somewhere near some companies who have got their headquarters. You can actually go on find a solicitor and find out who the solicitors are that are working in that organization, and add them on LinkedIn. A lot of people don't really leverage their sort of LinkedIn outreach. LinkedIn is really powerful for making connections with the right sort of people. Don't be scared to add people. Open up conversations. You'll be surprised how many people are, willing, especially who have walked that sort of path before, open to having a discussion or even being, a bit of a mentor. And that leads me on to my next question quite nicely. In your career, if you had any, really good mentors that, have sort of pushed you on in your career that, you feel that gave you good advice, at a certain point for sort of, structuring your career going forward?
Um, no individual person springs to mind, but I
Mm,
have learnt an awful lot from some of the senior leaders which I work with. So I've been fortunate enough to work in my regulated role with leaders of the business.
mm,
And in my current role, being relatively senior, I get to work with some senior stakeholders as well. And for me, it's not necessarily a mentoring approach, but it's watching which ones progress, which ones handle themselves in a way which engenders respect,
mm,
um, which ones are taking on board, for example, comments from all parts of the business rather than just perhaps ploughing their own path. And it's spotting those behaviours, spotting those traits from those individuals and thinking,
mm.
that's the kind of person I want to be remembered as rather than some characters who are, well, less desirable to follow, shall we say.
And with regards to, one of the things that I've seen a lot on LinkedIn is that sort of scaremongering that AI is coming to take, the lawyer's role. Would Have you seen much sort of, I guess in your sector it might be more apparent than in other sectors. Have you seen much sort of AI integration into the sort of, pharma industry? And where do you see it on the legal side going in the next sort of 5, 10 years?
There is some activity on the pharma side, definitely. Um, Not as much as you might believe from the hype, I would suggest, and certainly not in the legal profession as much as the hype would say.
Mhm.
Um, I think AI is going to be revolutionary, but it's not quite there yet. Um, so from time to time, I'll take demos with AI providers, and the solutions just don't quite live up to what they're promising yet. But it's
Mhm.
getting much better, and it's getting so much quicker, the improvements. So even if from 4 or 5 months ago, the tools from what I see are twice or three times as good as they were back then. So the
Mhm.
rate of acceleration, the rate of improvement is really, really impressive. And I can see a point in 12, 18 months' time where AI tools are commonplace for businesses.
Mhm.
But for me, that's one of the challenges, right? So if things are going so fast, why would you buy something today which is outdated in 6 months' time? You
Mhm.
wouldn't, right? In your personal life, you wouldn't buy a car with one in 6 months going to be twice as good or half the price or
Mhm.
something like that. Um, so in some ways, that the AI industry is its own worst enemy because it's doing such great things, it's making such great strides
Mhm.
that it can pause people to or cause people to wait a little bit and say, hang on, if I wait 6 months more or 3 months more,
Mhm.
something will be better. But there'll be a tipping point, right? For every business, for every professional, where they think, hang on a minute, that's just the right thing.
Mhm.
I'm going to jump in with 2 feet now. So it's definitely something I've got my eye on, definitely something I'm playing around with in my own time and trying to work out how we can best deploy it in my business. But it's not quite there yet, but I'm
Mhm.
optimistic it will be soon.
Yeah, I think with regards to it replacing lawyers, I don't think it can ever replace judgment. Um, but I think what it can do is make lawyers more efficient. Lawyers get bogged down with a lot of admin stuff. And their skill set isn't really being leveraged whilst they're doing sort of mundane tasks. And I do believe that that efficiency will be helped by AI, especially in house. But with regards to replacing a lawyer, I might come back to regret that saying that in like 5, 10 years time, but I really don't see it as a sort of alternative to having someone that's there that can sort of, I guess, think on their feet to certain problems, rather than just giving you the black letter of the law, which AI can be very good at doing, but it's not so much there on the business side of being commercial in its advice.
Exactly, 100% agree. Yeah, lawyers will be around for a long time to come, but they're all the ones which do well with the ones that can utilize technology to do more or do better. So I think there is a point coming fairly soon where we might find that AI can take a first pass at lots of things for us.
Mhm.
So I'm hopeful that in a year or two's time, AI will read an email from a colleague, redline the contract, point out what it thinks the changes are to me, draft an email ready to go back to the client or the internal colleague of them. And for me, it's about reviewing it and fine tuning it and then hitting send. So, that type of thing will change a job which might take 1 or 2 hours into 10, 15 minutes. And I think that's where hopefully we'll be in the not too distant future.
Yeah, no, I mean that resonates with where I guess I sit on that as well. But I've been surprised by how quickly. I mean, 2 years ago, none of us really knew about ChatGPT, for example, and just on a daily basis, you can go on Instagram or you can go on LinkedIn and you can see AI generated videos, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the sort of internet boom, where people were sort of resistant to it, but it was such a sort of leap in technology where you weren't able to ignore it after a certain period of time. So yeah, it's definitely one to watch. I have the next part of the podcast, which is quite an interesting one, which is meant to be a little bit fun, and it's a quick sort of fire question section, with regards to just getting to know you a little bit better, so I'll start with regards to favorite contracts or compliance.
Ooh, contracts every day.
Contracts.
They tell a great story.
I done quite a bit of compliance in one of my roles as a paralegal, a lot of KYC, and yeah, it wasn't the most exciting part of my job. Let's put it that way. Early bird or night owl?
Used to be night owl, definitely early bird now. Two young children, so I don't have a lot of choice with that.
Right. Last great book that you read?
Unbreakable by Ronnie O'Sullivan, the snooker player. Just finished it.
Mhm.
Remarkable. He is nothing like the person you see depicted in the press.
Mhm.
Introverted, worried, wanting to keep out the limelight, thoughtful, considerate,
Mhm.
the opposite of everything you see painted in the press, and completely different from the 21-year-old person that came onto the scene and everything's is a certain way. He's 50
Mhm.
years old nearly and a completely different guy. So fascinating expose almost of himself. So
Mhm.
definitely recommend it.
Good, good. Most underrated legal skill that you've got?
Most underrated. Wow. The ability to spot different fonts in a document very quickly.
I've got that one as well. Especially reviewing a lot of CVs, you become quite astute to it. Favorite part of your job?
Working with my team, really enjoy it. Really good characters, great personalities, lots of high skilled people as well. But a really nice bunch too. So.
Hmm, good. Courtroom drama or medical thriller?
Well, courtroom drama, yeah. Casualty, Holby City, keep me away from that.
What motivates you on a daily aspect to get up and do your job?
For me, about making a difference. Really enjoy having a positive impact on hopefully the people around me and the business which I work in.
Mhm.
But also slightly more broadly, kind of hopefully do my little bit to help improve the profession. So I post relatively frequently on LinkedIn with tips and tricks for lawyers, and um, we can do so much more as a profession. I really believe that we've got a great foundation, but we can do so much more by bringing that value, being a bit more personable. Yeah, we can together we can change the image of lawyers to something slightly more positive, I think. So.
That speaks to me. So, traditionally, this sort of in-house training contract hasn't been, when we've recruited paralegals, for example, for general counsels, legal directors, or heads of legal, only in the last sort of few years has there been less resistance to that. Before that, a lot of lot of lack of information in the sort of sphere with regards to how to go about it. And it seems a lot of trouble. I won't do it. Whilst it was actually quite easy, as long as you were 7 years PQE UK qualified, you were able to sort of make an application to be a training provider. The SRA implemented the SQE, and I feel that's been a bit of a game changer for people in the sort of bottleneck of the legal sphere. We found a lot of people who maybe if they were unlucky to get a 2-2 in their degree, sort of fall into that sort of bottleneck where they couldn't get a training contract, and if they weren't lucky enough in-house to get a training contract as well, they fell in that sort of pile of being too experienced for a paralegal role, and then not able to get, qualify as a lawyer. And we found a lot of people moved into contract management or even other careers because of that sort of bottleneck. There's definitely good aspects to what the SQE is. I guess what's your opinion on the SQE and the ability to sort of pick up qualifying work experience, because a lot of the time the in-house work experience historically was not worth anything. Apart from maybe if you're going to work in private practice, they would count it, but with actually towards your qualification route, it was discarded. So it'd be good to sort of understand what your thoughts are on the implementation of the SQE.
Yeah, I think it's been a little bit rocky in the first couple of years, but that's understandable, right? It happens with
Absolutely.
almost every new process. I think it's settling down a little bit now. I think the last data I saw on pass rates was slightly more encouraging. Not that everybody should pass, but it was particularly low when it first came out, which suggested that something wasn't quite right. And I think some of the goals of it in terms of broadening access to the profession are really important. So hopefully we'll see that more now, and we'll see, like you mentioned, the colleagues with lots of experience who perhaps struggle to fit into a traditional box will start to see their value recognised. So overall, I hope it's a good thing for the profession.
I think the cost aspect has been, definitely a sort of game changer. We all talk about inclusivity in the profession, but I paid over 40 grand for my legal training. That's the LPC and the GDL, and that is a sizable amount of money when you're paying for your rent in London, working, doing it part-time, and it excludes a lot of people. So bringing down the cost has been a sort of barrier for a lot of people, and I'm definitely for that, because I was paying. I was pretty much working. I remember I was working in recruitment to fund the LPC, and pretty much the majority of my paycheck would go to rent and to pay the fees. So yeah, I'm glad that they've sort of readdressed that sort of barrier to entry into the legal profession.
Definitely, and lots of lawyers do end up being well paid, but not all of them. I've seen data in the past where a quarter of barristers 5 years after qualification are earning less than 30,000 in London, right? So just because you get over that hurdle doesn't mean you can automatically pay back big fees. Similarly, if people are working perhaps in the charitable sector or an NGO, they're not going to be earning huge amounts to make that financial investment easily repayable. So yeah, definitely a good thing that it's more affordable.
Absolutely. And back to the sort of quick fire question. The last one I wanted to leave you with, one law that you change in the pharma industry that maybe annoys you on a sort of daily basis.
I'm not sure about pharma law. I would like to see a rebranding of privacy laws. I think they have a bad rep. There's lots of good stuff in there, but they're presented in a really clunky way, which isn't very business friendly or customer friendly. Principles are good. The structure is actually quite well thought out if you get into it, but the presentation's really terrible. So yeah, a rebranding, a reframing of privacy law would be helpful. So it's got good intentions and the outcomes can be good, but a bit of a facelift maybe.
And I guess just to leave it on the last question would be, what advice would you give anyone who's maybe thinking about a career change into law from, having walked those footsteps yourself, who might watch this podcast, what advice would you give them?
I would say go out and talk to people. It's a really generous profession. Make those connections, sit with people, have a cup of coffee. If you possibly can, spend some time, take some work experience. I know when I was in that position, I'd have a week's holiday from work and I'd spend it on work experience.
Mhm.
And that was a way of getting to know the sector, getting to know if I'd like it, getting to know if I wanted to spend my career there. And for me, that was really useful. As you say, it can be expensive even these days to train to be a lawyer. So before you jump in with 2 feet and spend or invest 10, 15, 20,000 or more, meet people, find out about it.
Mhm.
And people are really generous, right? Connect them and say, can I buy you a coffee? Can I buy you a sandwich? Something like that. People will take the time.
Mhm.
Maybe not everybody, but I think most of them will. You'll be pleasantly surprised. So make the most of your network and find out a bit more about it before you jump in. And I hope you like it.
Yeah, I think definitely any advice I would leave anyone with is do your research. Make sure it's for you. Law is not for every single person, and it shouldn't be. It should be for the people that are passionate about it. Make sure that you really understand the differences in different types of careers. Because it might be something like legal ops or company secretarial, which are all fantastic careers that have even legal recruitment that have some sort of aspect to the legal sphere, but without actually having to be a lawyer. So if it's something that you've maybe not considered, company secretarial is a fantastic career, and I also do company secretarial recruitment, and most of those people that fall into that sector had never heard of it before they got into it. They either got into it, from someone recommending them to the industry. They were maybe thinking about becoming a lawyer, and maybe that door was closed, or there's so many different ways that people, and it's fascinating ways that moved into company secretarial work. So there's definitely other careers as well if it's not law for you. So you definitely do your research and have a really strong 100% answer that that's what you want to do before you do invest any money in this career. Yeah.
Sounds good. Good
Yeah.
advice.
Um, I want to thank you, Michael, for your time. It's been extremely insightful, and I really hope that anyone that watches this podcast who's thinking about a career in house or even in law, really takes the sort of your experience and really uses it to their advantage. So I want to thank you for your time.
No, pleasure. Thank you, Gianpaolo. And yeah, to everybody watching or listening, feel free to connect with me, and I'm happy to share a bit more of my time if necessary, if it helps people out. So yeah, let's try and help
Brilliant.
everybody as much as we can.
Great. Thank you.